You for joining us for this session on Beyond the Western Canon, Improving STEM Representation with Teaching Resources. And it's presented by Hillary Fox, Danica Lewis, Michelle Jewell, Erin McKinney, and Tisha Metnek. I hope I pronounced that right. My name is Simon Rinksmith. I'll be the moderator for this session. I am joined by Jennifer Pate, and I'll be monitoring the chat for questions, and Jennifer will be available to help if you have any technical questions. We ask that everyone in this session adhere to the OESS Code of Conduct, and there's a link to the Code of Conduct in the, I can put in the chat, and I think you all have it, but I'll put it in the chat as well. But we want to emphasize a few things before we begin. The Open Education Southern Symposium strives to offer an open, inclusive, and friendly environment for all participants. All attendees are encouraged to help maintain a professional and welcoming environment free of any type of harassment. Together, we can create a space where individuals feel free to express themselves, work together, and come up with solutions to today's unique challenges. The organizers of OESS appreciate your help in making this symposium a friendly and welcoming virtual experience. And please note that all sessions are being recorded. And with that, I will turn it over to the presenters.
You know, we didn't discuss who would be the very first person to introduce everything. So I guess I can kick us off, and then Erin, if you want to take over with your section. Well, thank you all so much for having us here today. Our presentation is going to look at improving STEM representation using open education resources and open pedagogy and those types of teaching resources. So we'll go through really quickly and introduce ourselves. My name is Hillary Fox. I'm a collection and research librarian for agriculture, and I am part of our library's alt textbook team at NC State University.
I'm Tisha Metnek. I'm also a librarian at NC State. I support our College of Ag and Life Sciences, which is how I got involved with this. I liaise with both Erin and Michelle.
I'm Danica Lewis. I also collect for the life sciences. I'm a librarian at NC State.
I'm Erin McKinney. I'm an assistant professor and the director of undergraduate programs in applied ecology, and I have had a fabulous time collaborating with everyone else on this, in this and other projects.
And to round it out, I'm Michelle Jewell. I'm the science communicator for the Department of Applied Ecology at NC State. I also have very unstable internet, so I'm going to skip video for this presentation.
All right, and before we get too far, because NC State is a land grant institution, we for sure wanted to put up a land acknowledgement that allows all the work that we do at NCSU to be possible. Particularly the land that NC State sits on greatly impacted the Tuscarora and Catawba tribes, but because we're a land grant, our arms reach all across the state, and so many more indigenous tribes were impacted, as well as NC State benefited off the backs of slavery and systematic mistreatment of historically underrepresented groups. So we're going to leave this up on the screen for a few moments for you to process and reflect on. But if you're coming from another institution, I also encourage you to look at your institution's land acknowledgement.
Thanks, Hillary. I wanted to give a little bit of an origin story for what we're working on and why we decided to start working on it as well. So Erin and we are part of NC State's Department of Applied Ecology's DEI committee. And an issue we wanted to tackle was the historical overrepresentation of white men in our specific field of ecology. And in like many STEM fields, the history of ecology is largely described by those victors. You know, in that era when the foundations of our field were set, women and non-white folks were not just discouraged from pursuing those fields of study, but they were purposefully excluded. And back then, the important works done by women, people of color, especially the First Nations, were either absorbed and copied by white male colleagues or completely ignored, right, to the folly of the field. Two classic examples I've got here on the screen. I would say they're textbook, but that's actually the issue here, that they aren't in textbooks. Rosalind Franklin on the left, who discovered the double helix structure of DNA. And then on the right, you know, the victors were Watson and Crick, who won the Nobel Prize for that discovery. And it wasn't until many, many, many decades later that Rosalind got some recognition for that. And on the bottom here on the left, Onesimus was an enslaved man who taught others how to inoculate themselves from smallpox, largely avoiding a huge outbreak in Boston. That was a long-standing practice in Western Africa. But on the right here, we've got Edward Jenner, who is considered the father of inoculations vaccines, won several awards, and has several buildings named after him. So an Applied Ecology's DI committee sees it as the responsibility of the department to identify, name, and correct these injustices among many. We want to reinsert and recognize the ignored yet foundational works of the majority non-traditional ecologists, past and present. And while our department agrees that this is an important issue, we found two main barriers limiting folks' willingness to dive into the histories of their specific topics. The first was, researching and locating studies and researchers that were purposefully shunned is, as you can probably imagine, pretty difficult. And two, organizing this information in a way that's accessible and user-friendly and respectful is not a task that one researcher, teacher, or department can take on alone. And there's a risk of duplicating the effort here, which discourages time-strapped teachers and researchers. Thanks, Hillary. If you can move on to the next slide. But the superpower lying within all universities is the talent pool required to manage, verify, preserve, and organize information, and that's with our library scientists. So Hillary, Danica, and Tisha rounded out this critical expertise for the project, and so began this interdisciplinary work between ecology and library science. Our first important step, though, before embarking on this was to take a look inward into our group and understand our own limitations, as Tisha is going to describe for us next.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. So one thing that we want to make sure is the work we're doing is not radical. This is not something that we should be applauded for. This is something that everyone needs to be doing in their work. We're just sharing you the way that we have been doing it in our process. Within this, something that we are well aware of is that we are all white, female presenting people. We recognize that we are part of the problem, and this is not something beautiful or great that we're doing. We recognize that we are taking up space, and we hope that presenting with you all today will be able to find those who are doing this work that aren't us. And then logistics, overall, we recognize that we are a small group, and so we're not going to be able to do everything that we want and need to. So this work is going to take quite a bit of time for us to do. But with that, Erin is going to now talk about what we're going to do next.
Oh, Erin, you are muted. You're very excitedly speaking silently.
I am very excitedly speaking silently. Thank you so much. Now that we have that snafu out of the way, it's all smooth sailing. So next we have some questions for you to help crowdsource a more complete understanding of what we should and can be doing. For example, who else might be already doing similar work and who else we can include in these conversations. So Michelle has very helpfully dropped a tiny URL link to our Padlet into the chat. And in case you haven't used Padlet before, Hillary's going to lead us through the transition.
Yes, if you are unfamiliar with Padlet, well, first use the link that Michelle just dropped in the chat. And once you're in here, all of your answers will be anonymous, but you would kind of treat this like you would commenting on a Facebook page. To answer your questions, for example, what should we do? You can add the plus to add your comment. You can put a title on it or just jump straight into adding the text. So maybe what we should do is find collaborators. It's just an example, and then say present at OESS and ask who is doing similar work. And then you can hit publish and your response should pop up. And then you should also be able to like other people's comments as well. So while we do this, we'll be able to kind of troubleshoot if people have questions that pop up in the chat, but we'd like to spend maybe the next 3 or 4 minutes with you all adding your responses. You can definitely come back to this later and we can all look at it. And then we'll also spend a minute doing a recap of everything. Now, as we go through and think about these questions, I also want to reiterate, or the whole group does, there's no right or wrong answer. We're in the very early stages of trying to really figure out this project and the best way to tackle diversifying the sciences. Okay, we'll take about 60 more seconds if anybody wants to toss in another idea. Again, this will be available to you all to review afterwards, and we can certainly keep the discussion going after this presentation. Great. So I know it's early morning, especially for those not joining in Eastern time. So thank you for those who participated. And we do have one more of these coming up later in the session. But we've got some great feedback on trying to figure out some next steps, like figuring out the format that'll help engage and include as many collaborators as possible. And it looks like in addition to folks making banana bread and sourdough starters during the pandemic, we had someone who discovered a new flora that would be probably a really great contact for us to reach out to. And we've got some other people listed like NASA STEM, some other open resources to look into, and other people to help contribute to conversations like students and community leaders. All right, now we'll hop back into our slides. Erin, you're excited and silent again.
I know, almost. This may happen every time. So in my personal efforts to cultivate an awareness and appreciation of human diversity in my ecology classes, I identified 2 existing database initiatives to crowdsource entries that contain information about scientists who have different research and personal backgrounds. I've used each different database as the basis for a class-wide assignment for which students compile information about a researcher of their choice. So I'm all about choice, and their study system that they then upload to that parent project. In Global Conservation Ecology, which is a 200-level undergrad course that compares different conservation methods and policies across scales and across cultural and ecological contexts, we spend the final week focused on conservation as a success story. I find this to be particularly important because after spending a semester discussing the many setbacks and anthropogenic pressures that we have inflicted on the planet, nothing like a guilt trip for being a human, right? I feel like it's really important to end on a high note by reminding students of all the successes we have achieved in conservation and of the many people who are contributing currently to those successes. And hopefully that gives us hope and additional motivation and drive for the future. To that end, I ask students to work in pairs to highlight the conservation icon of their choice and submit an entry to Project Biodiversify. I specifically selected this project because it focuses on diversity, which is a theme central to conservation. So if we go to the next slide, Applied Ecology, another of the 4 classes that I teach, is a 400 level capstone style course in which students extend critical ecological concepts to novel contexts and applications. So it's general ecology expanded beyond, right? I've designed many of the assignments because this is an upperclassmen class. Many of the assignments not only serve to hone students' professional skills in critical thinking and science communication, but their assignments are specifically designed to produce content for an open digital textbook for the class. And that's a teaser for some future conversation. These assignments include collaborative writing and figure design to explain the relationship between key terms and overarching concepts for each topic throughout the semester. In addition, students have most of the semester to develop an entry for an ecologist who they would like to feature in the forthcoming textbook. So that was my title slide for the assignment, but students also submit their featured ecologist assignment to the Scientist Spotlights initiative. I specifically chose this project for applied ecology because the entries are intended to empower students in middle school, high school, and university settings. And to me, that's an open education goal, no throwaway assignment that really mirrors my intent for the digital textbook. So I think it helps to reinforce everything that I've told them since day 1 of the semester. Everything you do is going to pay forward. All the notes that have been provided to you on each topic were written up by previous students. So I've created a shared Google slide deck with a template that clearly describes the requirements for the assignment using specifications grading to specify the points that are awarded for the information that I'm requiring about each featured ecologist, as well as a picture of the ecologist themselves, either a professional headshot or, what we really love to find is really exciting pictures of them being humans, whether that's in the field interacting with their study system or doing something that they enjoy doing, as a human beyond science. In addition to that, each student has to create a bio-render figure to summarize the main concepts and contributions of that ecologist's research. In addition to the items on the slide, students then have to provide a written entry in the speaker notes to summarize the ecologist's research in about 200 words. So specifically, what scientific questions do they ask and what systems do they use to address those questions? What ecological concepts do they explore or invoke? And that we have actually studied in class. So again, those parallels to what they're learning, making everything relevant. And then asking, what are their major findings and what are the implications and importance? What is the big picture relevance? Is there anything else about their career or personhood that the student wants to feature? So next I have a series of some examples. I've run these assignments for 3 years now, and students are consistently enthusiastic about contributing to a textbook for future students. Again, that idea that the assignments aren't throwaway, the product is going somewhere. It's also been interesting to notice some patterns in which ecologists students choose to feature. Some students choose to feature scientists here at NC State University. Dr. Zakiya Leggett is very popular year after year. On the next slide, we see an example of a scientist who broke barriers at their institutions or in their respective fields of study. So, hugely motivational to see those firsts and make sure that they, get the spotlight that they're due. Or on the next slide, we see an example of a scientist who shared a passion for snakes, like one of my previous students in fall 2020. Or on the next slide, with whom a student might identify outside of STEM. After everyone has added their entries to the shared Google slide deck, we have a virtual gallery walk so that students can learn from and leave comments on each other's work. This helps us to celebrate not only the diversity of science and ecological research, but also the diversity of student interests and effective science communication styles within our class. So we can learn a lot from scientists out in the world and from ourselves and each other, the scientists within the classroom. Students have also shared specific feedback that this assignment is a useful exercise for finding information about researchers who exists out there already practicing this research. This is great preparation as students begin to search for grad school opportunities and for employment beyond undergrad.
All right, so Erin and Michelle provided a little context for the type of work that we're doing, but like they didn't just wake up one day and all of a sudden these assignments existed, right? There was a lot of support and partnerships that went into developing where they are right now and also to where we all hope to go going forward. So I want to highlight a little bit on a local scale how NC State University Libraries has supported projects like this. The big thing is through our alt textbook program. And this is a program where instructors can apply for a grant to address different things, but the big thing that we are looking forward is to focus on helping faculty with open education and open pedagogy by providing different levels of grants. And these grants, they're all fully listed on the screen, but just to give you an overview. These are the types of things that we do to support the project that Erin and Michelle have talked about so far. And also they've received further grant funding to continue this work going forward. But in general, instructors, they can review open textbooks, they can adopt or create an open textbook, they can implement some kind of new way of teaching, like developing a database or using this bio render assignment that Erin has. Or if there are multiple people in a department or multiple departments that want to go in on a project together, we can do some group funding. And to take a bit of a deeper dive, the libraries isn't just like giving money and saying, good luck, here you go. We, depending on what the grant recipient needs, the library caters to providing those services or connecting that recipient with someone who is able to help them. So the first thing that the alt textbook team does within the library is we get more information on what that instructor is trying to do. And as I said, we connect them with the appropriate people. So let's say within the libraries, for example, if someone is trying to adapt or adopt a textbook and they need to find materials, they might work with a subject specialist like myself, Tisha, or Danica to help them find resources. Or if someone is wanting to make videos for their course, they can work with the library's digital media specialist. Or if they have copyright questions, we have a copyright expert. Or maybe they have questions about accessibility, we can refer them to our student accessibility office. So anyways, this is just a short example of some of the things we can do. The list goes on, and we do take it case by case. And sometimes we get questions we've never received before. So we're forging relationships all the time through these partnerships. Okay, and as promised, here is another Padlet. We've just talked about relationships and where funding is coming from to do resources and to do projects like this. And so we also wanted to hear from you all on what some other funding opportunities might be, and what are just some other ways that we can go forward, or hearing who else might have this work as a priority. So I'll pull up this Padlet again. Michelle has dropped the link to the second Padlet in the chat. And it is the same link that is on the slide. We just made it into a tiny URL. But what we'll do with this is we'll spend about 5-ish minutes giving people a chance to contribute. And like before, we'll do another 1-minute overview of it. Also, this would be a great chance if you're interested in doing work like this, if you want to collaborate on a project or if you know other people, sort of like someone mentioned the scientists who discovered a new flora during the pandemic. We would love to hear more information about them. We're already getting some fantastic suggestions on this, like reaching out to different multicultural affairs offices. I could certainly see that being really beneficial to us reaching out to other schools that people have recommended, perhaps with OK State, like people have listed on the screen so far, to see what additional work they're doing, for example, in addition to Native Earth and Native Sky. Looking at statewide grant funds, yes, I think there'd be a ton for education, and depending on the state, lots of other opportunities. Or centers for teaching, yes, all great ideas. People are loving the template. Yeah, that'd be great if we used Hypothesis. And if you haven't used that before, it's an open source annotation tool, but for people to chime in on that. Also, it looks like it's really important for people to include information about the scholar or the scientist and the path that they took to get to their current role. I think that can be really inspiring to a lot of students as well, especially if they might be feeling like they don't fit this idea of the traditional Western path, right? Okay, we'll wrap up in this last minute. I'm really excited to check out more about the Native Earth, Native Sky project. That hasn't one that's come up in our discussions before, so I think the rest of the team is really looking forward to diving into that a little more. Okay, all great ideas. As you all, if you happen to think about this beyond this presentation, please come back here and add in your ideas. Or if you want to privately message one of us to share your ideas, or you want to talk more after this, please reach out to any of us or throw your contact information on here.
All right. So throughout all of this work, we've got some really interesting information needs. So now we're really going to try and dig a little bit into the different options we have for information sources and some of those strengths and weaknesses, and what we can do to help students in these assignments find researchers who are like them or who are not like them, and help expose them to people who may be similar or dissimilar from themselves. So there's some broad categories of information, right? We've got the traditional sources, your dictionaries and biographies. Those have their problems. They're kind of our stated reason for undertaking this project. There's also some new and emerging resources. So there are DEI collections that are being sold commercially that were built specifically to highlight diverse groups. You can, if you're a librarian and you're being sent those title lists, you can use those to find resources, build out your collection, and highlight more diverse groups, make sure they're being represented. There's also improved metadata, so it's easier now to search through library catalogs through linking. And also just some fundamental improvements so that if you went to a library catalog and searched Black scientists, you'd also get results like top 101 scientists, which is an improvement. There's still plenty of problems, but there's a lot of improvement there as well. All right, so some of the strengths. I wonder if my slides got swapped around.
Do you need to fast forward or rewind and see what's happening?
Yeah, Hillary, can you try advancing one slide? Okay, can you advance another slide? Huh, okay. I'm so sorry about this. Could you go back to that first slide? I think the order got a little odd. Okay, but so in terms of the traditional stuff, the strengths are that with new additions, there are changes. There's the people who maintain these dictionaries and thesauri are also working hard to include more diverse examples. So especially if you have with one of those dictionary or reference sources that is an online reference that you have to pay a subscription fee for every year, part of that subscription fee had better be improving representation, and that's something that you should talk to your representative about. You also have the same general advantages as traditional literature. So it's well researched by biographers and historians. It can be considered authoritative with some really important caveats there. But weaknesses of the traditional sources, they typically deal with historic figures. And so things like assigning queer identities can be really inappropriate. Some figures are being claimed by the community based on things like personal correspondence, or there's speculation, but assigning a sexuality or a romantic orientation to someone else in general is not great. So there are some complications around historic figures and finding representation, especially for queer communities. And of course, the majority of the existing literature doesn't represent a diverse or inclusive view of science. And even with efforts to correct that, there's still some really big gaps. You could advance one, Hillary. So beyond traditional literature, there's the gray literature. We have here a list of projects that we use and that are inspirational to us. So a lot of the strengths of these projects are that they're more modern representations of living scientists, which also means scientists can self-identify and they can be in control of how they're represented and what aspects of their identity they do or do not want highlighted. Weaknesses here are that it can be less curated. There's different amounts of information available. So I've talked about the trouble with traditional sources and the work being done to update and improve representation in traditional sources, especially if you have an online subscription-based resource. That's something I'd recommend you follow up on and really put pressure on the publisher to make that a priority. There's also a lot of new places to look in the gray literature. If there's a project or resource that you love that we haven't found yet, please hop on one of the Padlets and make sure that you drop us a link there.
Oh boy, I think we're all looking around. We forgot to say who's going to start this and who's going to end it. But with all of this work that we're going into, we've highlighted what we want to do, the work that we want to have going forward. And with the Padlets, we have questions that we wanted to outsource to other people as well, to find collaborators, to figure out what are we missing, who should be part of these conversations, what should we do for additional funding, and to really get this project moving forward and to have it go just beyond NC State and beyond the classroom right now. But when doing all of this, all the conversations that have happened so far, a lot of time and effort have gone into it, especially by the Department of Applied Ecology through NC State University Libraries, the students in AEC 400 and 245, as well as a colleague of Erin and Michelle's, Diane Lafferty from the Department of Biology at Northern Michigan University. So I'm sure, like in any kind of like Oscar speech or something, we're forgetting people at this point. But this is just a short list of who has been really key players, and we want to hopefully present at a future conference saying, here's what we finally done, and have just a page exploding with names and organizations that have helped. If you'd like to grab our slides, we have included a link, and Michelle has dropped that in the chat. We also have a QR code if you ever want to come back to this. And again, it's a great way to stay active on the Padlets or to follow up with us. And so at this point, these are all of our slides, but we wanted to turn things around to you all. We intentionally left a lot of time for discussion, hopefully to answer questions in the chat or to hear ideas or challenges from you all, really just open to anything at this point. But Erin, Tisha, Danica, and Michelle, was there anything else?
The slides require access.
I'm gonna get the sharing permissions fixed. Just a sec.
Thanks, Danica.
So should be fixed now. Jennifer, if you could check that for us.
It works now.
Great. Just,
Thank you.
I know we have a bit of time here, and I'm improving here, and I just really want to celebrate the library team that we have at NC State. We have some of the best folks, honestly. Having worked at lots of different institutions, I just absolutely love being able to send, like Erin and I regularly do, go, hey, we've got this wacky idea, or we have this like really important, project that we want to get off the ground, like this one, or hey, let's just like make a podcast about something. And there's an email address at our libraries. There's somebody who is dedicated to this type of work somewhere that we can access as researchers and staff members. And so I just want to celebrate the university libraries team, and specifically, of course, Hillary, Danica, and Tisha, who are here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Y'all are my go-tos. You probably get more emails than you care to receive from me for classroom guest speaker requests, for bouncing ideas off of stuff, for, hey, are you up for being the random fielders of help? I want to make a podcast or something from my students for their projects. And it's incredible. Consistently, when any of you visits my class, the students for the next week are talking about, I can't believe I didn't know how to make an annotated bibliography before, or I can't believe I didn't know, Tisha, these are specific shout outs to you. I can't believe I didn't know the difference between all these different search engines, and, just absolutely fabulous. And the number of, inspirational, oh my gosh, I could make a shareable Zotero library for my class with all the resources in it. Oh, and then they could add stuff too. It's just, icing on a cake. And there is so much icing.
Well, thank you, Erin and Michelle. That's really kind of you. And hopefully this is some encouragement to you all. I know a lot of librarians attend these conferences, but if you aren't a librarian, certainly reach out to someone at your libraries. If you have a subject specialist or a general reference librarian, to ask really like one, any kind of random question like we've noted in the chat. But if you're interested in pursuing open education more, especially perhaps if you're at a smaller institution where you don't have this privilege of having funding available to you to adapt and adopt open education resources. Even talking with your librarian and saying, hey, I want to reduce the cost of my course for students to make it more accessible. Can you help me see if there's an open textbook or some open courseware that's already been curated, and kind of help me put together sort of this like patchwork of open and free resources over the next year? That's certainly an appropriate and feasible question to ask. So I'm not seeing anything popping up in the chat, just really great excitement about cake and also a lot of accolades for this presentation.
But earlier during the presentation, I popped a link to my template for the featured ecologists assignment. So that's openly shareable. Yeah, feel free to use it, adapt it, do what you need. There's an example of me in there that I made of myself because I don't expect anyone to ever feature me. You do not have to share that example or use that example. I just try to do every assignment that I have my students do. But yeah, I think this is also a great space for general Q&A. How does this stuff work? Or, you know, please play the devil's advocate, poke holes in these ideas so that we can, you know, avoid failure.
Just a side note in our slides, I did put Erin's template so that way if the chat isn't saved in this, it will be available there for those who are interested.
Thanks, Tisha.
Okay, and we'll take a bit of a Zoom pause to see if anyone pops up with questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and provide, like Erin said, like any kind of like feedback, whether it's poking holes or saying, hey, have you considered XYZ going forward? Or just, like I said, like really any kind of comment or feedback to help us carry this project forward would be greatly appreciated.
I actually have a question. So the from the template, you're building these and you're putting them on a website. Is the website explicitly marked as open source, as with like a CC BY or CC BY NC?
So the Scientist Spotlight Initiative, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't mark the student products. Now I'm thinking maybe we should, but it's the screenshot for that website includes the you know, a search bar so that anyone can look through all of it once it's been added to the Scientist Spotlight database.
Okay, well, I will stop. Or Erin, were you about to say something? I thought I saw you unmute.
Yeah, for once I was unmuted, huh? I was thinking if it helped to spark conversation, some ideas that we had thrown around in a preliminary discussion of, you know, this idea, how might we format it, right? Is it, because we could imagine a community kind of wiki edit-a-thon, or, you know, so thinking through even what are different formats for this kind of collection or database? How do we make it searchable? And you know, I'm airing some of the unanswered questions that we've been asking amongst ourselves in the group, right? What format? Where does this thing get housed long term? I hope y'all don't mind. I'm airing our dirty laundry. These are the questions we need answered. And then, you know, do we focus on this as an assignment within classrooms at NC State? Do we make it an entire community, you know, have celebrating diversity week? Like, you know, there's the library's edit-a-thon, like contribute. Do we have different stages or forms of engagement where some people might just want to add names to the list of people who should be highlighted? And then other people could then look at the list if they want to just plug away and learn about humans. Yeah, off the top of my head, those were different aspects I tend to overthink preemptively, as you can tell. Different aspects that I was seeing that might become logistically challenging, but important to streamline as we move forward. So.
It looks like we got a recommendation in the chat, making this, the work that this team is doing, a candidate for the Open Educational Practice Certificate by the Open Education Network. Yeah, thank you, Kathy. We will, I've done that from the library side of things where you get the library certificate version, but I wasn't aware of this like broader aspect that you can take in for educators. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything else coming in. So I guess if people want to take a bio break or grab coffee before the 12 o'clock / 11 o'clock or other time zone sessions, we can wrap things up here. All right, well, thank you.